Good morning. I'm going to be talking about responsibility and otherness. Now that seems odd, doesn't it? As a title, otherness? What is otherness? Also responsibility, I was thinking how it seems to be almost instinctive. This is my erroneous thinking, actually, that it seems almost instinctive that people would have a sense of responsibility. But this is not the case. The sense of responsibility requires sensitivity. Sensitivity to others. Sensitivity to the cosmos. Sensitivity to nature, to the environment. And then what the teaching does, it takes this word, responsibility, and takes out of the word the sense of responsiveness. So the sense of responsibility and otherness truly means our response to the outer world and the inner world and the higher worlds. The sense of responsibility in a person is a sign that they are advancing towards spiritual achievements. So what is so beautiful, let's say just in this case, this word, this phrase, the sense of responsibility, the teaching takes us into such deep levels of understanding. Or we could even say the causal level of understanding of what the sense of responsibility is all about. So again, it is a sensitivity to, a responsiveness to otherness. On the other hand, and this is why it's not instinctive, at least says after all of my studying and reading and observing and experiencing people who have a lack of responsibility are those who are still immersed in building their ego. When a person is so immersed in building their ego, they're trying to find their identity, their purpose, the purpose of life. So it's almost like they live in a room of mirrors where all they can see is themselves, which is not otherness. See what I'm saying? So until individuals or a humanity can develop a sensitivity to the purpose of life, to this construction of right human relations, then their instinctiveness is self-centeredness. It's not a responsiveness to others. Now let me begin with a quote from the book Infinity, Volume 2, paragraph 48. And this is what it says. This takes us out into the cosmos. The understanding of responsibility must be developed limitlessly. That's the first phrase. So for example, you take that individual that lives in a room of mirrors, you take down the mirrors, and in the replacement of mirrors are windows. Now they can see out beyond themselves through the windows. And as we can see through the windows, or we could say the eye of the soul, now we are beginning to develop responsibility. And that responsibility must be developed limitlessly. Limitlessly means to, again, go beyond our own boundaries, our own sphere of livingness, and to move out into the community, into your country, into the world, into understanding other cultures. And then if we can understand limitlessly, to move out into space and recognize that we have a sense of responsibility to the cosmos. This is what the Master is saying. The understanding of responsibility must be developed limitlessly. Now, the paragraph goes on to say the human spirit, being a creator, bears the responsibility of all its actions. Let us not be afraid, he says, to meet responsibility. We are responsible not only to ourselves, but of cosmos. When he says we are responsible not only to ourselves, he's not just talking about that person that lives in a room of mirrors. He's talking about humanity as a whole. The whole world must be responsible not only to the world as we know it, planet Earth as we know it, but also to cosmos. And then he ends this quote, the Master ends this by saying, manifest understanding of responsibility and of the beauty of infinity. So you see how this takes this whole phrase of the sense of responsibility and otherness way beyond, our own little world. The law of responsibility is one of the highest laws in the universe. And now we can understand that by understanding what the Master is saying, the beauty of infinity. That this law of responsibility is one of the highest laws in the universe. To be responsible means to understand fully that you must and can make people either happy or miserable just by your thoughts, by your words, and also by your actions, your thoughts, your words, and actions. You can make people either happy or miserable. When you have this sense of responsibility, you live in a way that you not only prevent misery for others, but that you increase their joy and happiness and success. And also you become their protector without violating their freedom. Now, those are lots of words. And every word has significance to it. See, the way I see it is that the majority of people, when they are engaged in otherness, when they are engaged in relations with other people, that engagement is based typically on opinion and bias and prejudice. And that means you must understand, you, the other, must understand my way of thinking. If you don't understand my way of thinking, my thoughts somehow, my words, my actions are going to be found with a wall between the others and myself. That means that individual who thinks that way with that wall is still living in a room of mirrors. I hope I'm making myself clear here. So I'm going to repeat this statement that I said earlier. Why responsibility is not so easy to undertake, because the sense of responsibility in a person is a sign that they are advancing towards spiritual achievement. Without this sense, a person does not have direction. Say they don't have direction yet. And what's also interesting to me is that they do not have usefulness. They don't have usefulness. So again, we go back to this phrase, sense of responsibility means sensitivity toward others. And we could even expand that to say sensitivity toward the purpose of others, their life purpose, their life vision, the purpose of this incarnation. See, all of these elements come under the umbrella of sensitivity and responsiveness. It is in this sense of responsibility that causes people to use their life as a tool to uplift others' consciousness and as a tool to create right human relations. You see how it's all coming together now? Right. A great teacher once said that the first sign of a person awakening to spiritual realization is the presence within themselves of the sense of responsibility. Responsibility is based on the word responsiveness. So there is no responsibility if we do not respond to things. In other words, responsiveness is the registration of people's thoughts, feelings, motives, circumstances, and conditions. When we become increasingly sensitive and more responsive, that means now we are able to register. Imagine this, we are able to register other people's thoughts, their feelings, their motives, their circumstances, and their conditions. So responsibility creates in us a sense of oneness, with other people and nature. In the esoteric community, there is almost a mantra of the word oneness. We are all one. So we're planting this idea, this seed, this thought of oneness. And yet behind this thought, this seed thought of oneness, comes what? The sense of responsibility. See that? Responsibility creates in us a sense of oneness, not only with other people and nature, but if we do not see rivers and mountains and do not hear the beautiful songs of birds, then we do not respond. And we do not feel one with them. There seems to be almost I don't know what you would call it, almost an obsession with some people with their animals. They either really, really, really love their pet, or they couldn't care less. And what I see this is that people want a sense of closeness with others, and that sense of closeness can typically be found with your adoring pet. Now, why is that? because that pet gives you unconditional love. Doesn't talk back to you. Might bark a little bit or meow a little bit. But they normally will give you unconditional love. See, that's that first experience of many. That first experience of oneness. See, so when that animal passes, and unfortunately, dogs seem to live a lifespan of anywhere to 10 to 15 or 16 years, then that pet passes on. Now, that pet is teaching us about the transitoriness of life, that everything changes. They're teaching us how to let go, but that love remains in our heart. That sense of oneness with that pet remains in our heart. It's like this morning, I was on Facebook, which I do every morning, usually because I go to our Facebook site, the Agni Yoga, the community of the Living Ethics community, Agni Yoga Living Ethics community, to see the activity going on. And then inevitably I go to my timeline and I see, this morning there was a video of about 100 pictures of this beautiful little Sheltie who left 10 years ago, crossed the Rainbow Bridge 10 years ago, and the family is still mourning. What are they mourning? That loss of love, that sense of oneness, that sense of closeness. They're developing a sensitivity, even though it's to a pet. Let's elevate that, not just to our pets, but to our friends and family members. See the otherness, sense of responsibility and otherness. If you think that the sense of responsibility means withdrawal, this is a whole nother, what I'm talking about now is a whole different approach to understanding the sense of responsibility. If you think the sense of responsibility means withdrawal and independence of action, you reveal a well-concealed sense of ambition and possessiveness. And we know how all such feelings are disapproved of by the great ones, by the masters, by the capital T teachers. If we do not destroy within ourselves the sense of ownership, if we do not destroy this sense within ourselves of ownership in all aspects, then we cannot easily reach the next step. It may be that you consider possessively not only your own section, but even our pupils, says the Master, saying that it may be that you consider possessively not only your own section, your own life, your own immediacy, your immediate environment, but also their environment, their pupils, their disciples, and acquaintances as their own. And the Master says we would become hurt if some of our collaborators also evinced an interest in our disciples taking possession. Now, I know this is not easy to understand, so let me give you an example. It's not easy to understand, particularly if you're not in this realm of thinking, or if you're not in an environment, let's say, because of my experience is basically here and now, is leadership in the esoteric community. Leaders, let's say, are visionaries. All right, so we have, let's say we have 100 people in the group, and all the individuals in the discipleship group are physically, emotionally, mentally developed. They're thinkers. On the other side of that coin, they're still working on themselves for otherness, meaning they're still trying to eradicate what worked well for them in the past, vanity and ego. But now vanity and ego are obstructions to that next step. Okay, so this is an experience which I had, so this is a little personal. One day, a student of the leading light, let's call him the leading light, a student of the leading light came to me and said, I'm speaking on behalf of the leading light, and your group is going to be responsible for a production about the future. And your part to play is to compose the music in that production. The production will be developed and created by some of the members in your group. So this individual saying they were speaking for the greater light, we were responsive, see, to that, let's call it command, that creative command. So we poured our time and energy into the production. I spent hundreds of hours creating music for this production. There was a little voice in my head that said, why isn't the leading light stepping in every once in a while to tell us ask how are things progressing, how are things moving forward? But I didn't pay any attention. So the music was composed, the production was created, and one day I went over to the ashram of the leading light and talked to the head choir director, and I said, I'd like you to listen to this music and tell me what you think about it. And so she listened to the music, told me what she thought about it. The next week, I went back home, and the next week I received a knock on my front door. The leading light had sent 2 people to me with the message, do not play that music. And then some other words were given to me. What had happened is this person who said they were the spokesperson for the leading light withdrew from the group community, took on a project as if that action was their action. Independence of action. So what happened is that this individual took on a sense of ownership of something that was fabricated, fantasized, in their mind, and affected so many people. And that whole experience went on and on and on. I will never forget it. It was a dark force that came in because of ego and vanity. And we know how all such action, ambition, and possessiveness is disapproved of by all teachers. So interesting. But the nice thing for me was after, taking all of that, all those pieces of music and all that composition and putting it aside, is that the leading light sent me a letter and said, I want you to play my music in the production. And not only that, I want you to conduct my choir. So there was the vote of confidence that the leading light had, as opposed to the individual whose vanity and ego and that had that concealed sense of ambition and possessiveness. Again, let me repeat this statement that I said a little earlier, but didn't really make much sense when the Master says it may be that you consider possessively not only your own section, your own stuff, but even our pupils, disciples of the Master, disciples of the greater light. We would become hurt, he says, if some of our collaborators also evinced an interest in them. And this is when Helena Rourke says, there are a few warnings to those who have a false sense of responsibility, a falseness that is the result of strong vanities, a falseness, for example, of when the leadership gives a person some important task, important responsibilities, and they begin to take an independence of action, which reveals ambition and possessiveness. The slave-holding attitudes arises from this sense of ownership. And you know how difficult it is to eradicate such feelings, Helena Rourke says. You must remember that the teacher has not a single personal thought. Absolutely everything is directed and given to the service of the common good, the general good. Therefore, the one who alters the indication or allows themselves to doubt in the vision or in the direction given by the leading light should lay blame on themselves. All that is done in a halfway manner will bring halfway results. Isn't that interesting? Complete obedience to the indications and the precise execution of them gives us health and leads us to great victory, to great light. In ancient times, obedience was a step toward the next ordainment. The one who is unable to realize entirely the discipline of obedience could never reach the higher degrees. So I'm going to go back to a dog story. Oftentimes, owners of pets that have bought a really special pet, a special breed, let's say a Shetland sheepdog, okay, these cute little Shelties, they are so responsive to the obedience training. So these little dogs are put into training classes, and then there's competition. And the way they win these competitions is through obedience. This obedience creates perfection in the nature of that little animal. Now, the dogs that are responsive to the trainer, obedience to the directions and the training of the trainer, they win first place. And then they go on to a higher competition with higher meaning, better trained dogs. Now, this is just the animal kingdom. But if we can just elevate that a bit in resonance and circumstance to the soul of a human being, or the soul of a group being responsive to the Christ. Don't we want to have that sensitivity to the directions of the Christ, the directions of hierarchy, the directions of the Master's ashram, which requires obedience to their direction? And the more obedient we are to their directives, the greater servers we will be to the greater good. But somehow along the path of life, that word obedience became tarnished and inverted to something ugly. Only the one who knows how to obey and to execute a certain task that must be accepted with not only humility, but with this great sense of responsibility. Accepting the given task must be accepted with the greatest of humility, alongside this sense of responsibility. Agreeing the nature of the task must not be changed due to their lack of foresight. Advancing disciples lacking foresight, even if demonstrating a sense of responsibility, this is important to hear. Advancing disciples lacking foresight, even if demonstrating this sense of responsibility, find the cause of the lack of foresight is because vanity obscures their soul. Such vanity will bring damage to the orders of the teacher. See what happened with that woman who came to the group and said, I am speaking. I am the voice of the leading light. I cannot begin to tell you the damage that was done to so many people, the time and the energy. Ultimately, I learned so much. We learned so much from that experience. It became a success, but not in the way we expected. With all this, one must firmly understand that all the given orders can never enslave the spirit of a disciple, because there is always left the freedom of individual expression. And we know how endlessly we may refine the quality of the fulfillment of every task. Only a slave of yesterday may revolt against an order. Only the slave of yesterday may revolt against an order. Only a petty consciousness is afraid to lose its individuality by fulfilling the plans of their teacher. To rely only upon their own accumulations, rejecting all that you can assimilate, rejecting all that you can assimilate from the high consciousness of the teacher means to reject any new accumulations. Individuality is formed from these new assimilations, combined with previous accumulations that go into our chalice. Extremely happy is the one who can draw upon the treasury of the great consciousness. Now let me quote from the book Infinity. The idea of obedience to the teacher seems to be alien to people. But how can the spirit lose when the teacher is the leading light? How can the disciple lose their fire when the teacher lights all fires? How can the shield of the teacher hold back what the Spirit is allotted? The great sense of responsiveness given to you to do. For example, as you feel responsive, you will understand your teacher, your friends, and your family members better. As you understand, you analyze more, and eventually your relationships will improve. Responsiveness is a method which brings you closer to that which you are responding. Responsiveness is a method which brings you closer to that which you are responding. So the word responsibility is based on the idea of responsiveness. You cannot feel responsible if you do not respond to people or to events, to ideas, or to plans. To be responsive, you must have an increasing sensitivity or the power of registration. The brain, certain areas in the brain will be responsive and thus register. The power to register inspiration from that which is a higher vibration than yourself. Once you have the needed sensitivity, you will become increasingly responsive to situations, to conditions, to people, to your co-workers, your teacher, and more. Responsiveness changes into responsibility only when you realize that you have your own share in whatever is happening in your environment. You have your own share of responsibility. Usually, such an awareness comes when you make a contact with your teacher or your higher self. This sense of responsibility is felt when any or all of the following actions occur. 1, when you fail to take the actions you should have taken. When you take the wrong actions, that sensitivity will help you recognize it. When you feel responsible for both the well-being and the shortcomings of others, you feel responsible. That's a sense of responsibility being felt. When you respond to the qualities in others and feel responsible for awakening and cultivating and making others translate these qualities. Learn to be responsive instead of holding a sense of ownership. It's like, for example, the teacher wants to learn more about technology. So they go to the individual in the group that knows more about technology. If that individual lacks the sense of response to the need of the teacher and says instead, "Oh, I know more than the teacher," they're responding with that sense of ownership. And that sense of ownership finds them belittling the teacher, belittling the light of the teacher. It's very interesting. For example, there is a sense of responsiveness when you see the talents of others. When you see, let's say, the potential, a hidden talent in someone in your family or in your group, and you become jealous of that and try to suppress that talent, Now is when the ego and vanity is obstructing you from taking that next step into spiritual freedom. For example, a young girl was trying to be a violinist. Her parents were very cold toward her strivings. They did not respond to her talents, and she began to use them toward destructive ends. The parents said, "We did not do anything. We didn't tell her to play the violin or not to play the violin. She is responsible for her condition, not us." But you see, in a subtle sense, her parents were responsible because they did not see her talent. They did not nourish her talents. Once you respond to another person's talents, you feel responsible to cultivate and encourage those talents. This is why a sense of ownership, of jealousy, or even of indifference are types of sins and crimes. To what degree have you recognized talents in others? Have you really discarded your vanity and jealousy and dedicated yourself to water and to nourish the talents of others and helping them bring their talents into manifestation? The leader is smart, is sensitive to recognizing and encouraging and nourishing those sometimes hidden, sometimes a little more obvious talents of the membership, and in nourishing those talents, the group becomes more substantial. If you do this, you will see the corresponding talents within yourself starting to bloom and to express themselves. So learn to be responsive instead of criticizing, belittling, or rejecting, or being jealous. These negative expressions close off the possibilities for your own talents and cause them to dry up within you. It's so interesting. When a true leader, a really true leader, whether that leader is the head of a nation or of a group, in giving a task to a person who takes on this sense of ownership, the leader will fire them. The head of the nation, if they are sensitive, will fire that one who is taking an action of ownership. When that happens, look at what that one with such a strong ego and vanity is denying within themselves, the opportunity to advance and unfold greater potential in themselves. So the steps toward responsiveness are as follows: the recognition of others' talents, encouragement, and furnishing of the help needed in order to facilitate the expression of another person, appreciation, efforts to recognize similar talents even existing within yourself, efforts to manifest and to translate your talents. Irresponsibility, which is the same as being unresponsive to the talents and potential of others, freezes the potential of others without actually attacking them directly. It is a crime to show indifference or to express any attack or talent because of your jealousy and fear and vanity. It is a more serious crime not to see, not to recognize, and not to appreciate the talents of others. Irresponsiveness to the talents of others is a sign that your heart is dead, that you are engaged in destructive actions, that your past karma has blinded your vision and recognition, that you are either obsessed or possessed by those who are against progress and beauty. Encouraged by great ones and appreciated by them for their creative labor, they will be immune. These are those who are being attacked, who are being suppressed, whose genius is being suppressed, whose ability is being suppressed. They will be encouraged by the great ones, and they will be appreciated by the great ones for their creative labor. These individuals under attack will be immune from attempts to discourage them. When a creative person has contact with the higher worlds, all worldly indifference to their work and various attacks make them achieve greater depths of creativity. This is done in such a way that in future incarnations, they produce greater fruits of labor. It is not easy to be recognized in the higher worlds and to be inspired by the great ones. We must work hard, and we must prove our talents and our sacrificial nature. We must first be recognized and loved for our service. Then in another incarnation is when you'll be recognized by the higher worlds. And I think I will close there. It's a lot to assimilate this morning. Okay, thank you for listening. And this talk will be up on YouTube later today or tomorrow morning. Listen again and really think about your opportunity and the importance of developing your sense of responsibility and otherness. Okay.